Welcome to the Art of Badassery, where I explore what it takes to live life on your own terms, break free from the status quo, and unleash your inner badass. Whether you're a rebel at heart or simply seeking inspiration to step outside your comfort zone, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Mahara Wayman, and each week I dive into the stories, insights, and strategies of those who have mastered the art of badassery and are living life to the fullest. They smile when no one is looking. Welcome to the Art of Badassery, and I'm going to do things a little bit differently today for those of you that watch the podcast or listen on a regular basis. I typically write an introduction for my guests, but honestly, my guest, there is so much to her story, and I thought I would invite her to introduce herself based on what she feels you need to know most about her and who she is today. Please welcome Reverend DeeAnne Rose Hope. Welcome to the Art of Badassery.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I have been looking forward to spending more time with you since our first interaction because I fell so madly in love with your essence and your energy. And so I'm so happy to be with you and sharing in this sacred space with you. So thank you for inviting me to introduce myself. You know, it's always tricky to talk about ourselves, but I feel like talking about ourselves allows us to receive our own medicine in a lot of ways. And so, as I'm sharing this, I hope that you understand that the intention is that this can be medicine for you in some way as well. Um, First of all, I want to say that I am a child of divine, as we all are. This is the same for every single one of us. And I want to remind us of that because I think it's so easy to forget with all the conditionings and the distractions that we have going on in our world. So I think that's important for me to start with. But I do want to go back to my story and explain to you a little bit more about what I've been through so that you can understand where I'm at today. When I was 5 years old, I had my first death. I was eating a Jawbreaker candy. Do you remember those candies, those round, hard candies? And I remember my dad very clearly shaking his hand at me and saying, "Go sit down before you choke." So I went to go sit down and I took a breath in, and that candy got lodged in my throat. So my dad came running over. It was a complete blockage of my airway, couldn't make a peep. My dad came running over, wrapped his arms around me, starts doing the Heimlich maneuver, and that candy would not budge. And so I went limp in my dad's arms. And in that moment, I had an out of body experience. I was floating above my body, watching my dad frantically try and get this candy out. I remember watching my older sister peek around the corner to see what the commotion was, my mom running to the phone to call for help. And even though there was chaos below me, I didn't feel any of that. I felt complete and total peace. I felt like I was held in the arms of God, Creator, whatever you might call that. And it felt so beautiful to me. I remember just feeling such peace in that moment. It didn't last very long though, because my dad used his thumb, pushed against my throat inside, and was able to pop the jawbreaker out, which, by the way, please do not do. That is not recommended. But my dad was desperate because at that point, I was clinically dead, no pulse, no heartbeat. And so he got that object out and he revived me. So I say my dad gave me life not once, but twice. And so as a result of that experience, it took a few weeks for all the blood vessels, like all the blood vessels in my face had broken. So I had these purple, blue spots all over my face. And eventually that went away. But mom noticed some changes in me. My dreams became very lucid. I started to have premonitions. So I started to know things before they would happen. And I would go tell my mom, "Oh, mom, so and so died in my dream last night." Like not the nicest premonition, but and my mom, her jaw would hit the floor because she'd be like, "How do you know these things?" And indeed they were true. And so I was raised in a loving Catholic home, and mom, I don't think, really knew what to do with me. And so I could feel some discomfort. And so what did I do? I started to hide those things. Now, having a near death when you're so young, um, it makes you, well, for me, in my experience at least, it made me feel like I owed God something, like I had to prove my place, right? If I was given a second chance, surely I have work to do, and I've got to prove my worth. So then I became an overachiever, people pleaser, of course. By grade 4, I was the president of the Kids for Saving Earth Club. Like I seriously was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I thought I was meant to save the world. Why would God bring me back to life, right? And so I struggled with that. And yet I hid so much of myself from the world because it didn't feel safe for me. So now, fast forward, I'm now 18 years old and I am an EMT. So I'm working on ambulance. I'm an EMT, a dispatcher, and a firefighter. And of course, I went into that profession because I wanted to save lives like my dad had saved mine. But what started to happen for me, even though I had turned off a lot of my intuitive gifts and my empathic gifts, in that profession, something really interesting started to happen to me. I started to feel the energy of the spirits of the deceased when I was done doing a call. And I remember one woman in particular. She was in her 90s. She died in her sleep, but I had to hang out with the body while the police took pictures and did their thing. So I was with her physical body for a long time. So as I left there, I could feel this energy. I thought for sure I had PTSD and I was losing my mind. Like I was losing it completely. I remember having several showers that day, thinking like that would get rid of that feeling. But that was not the case. I just didn't know what to do with that. So now I'm leaving that profession. I'm actually going to teach. So I ended up teaching in health sciences at Saint Nate in Alberta, Canada. I loved teaching. It was what called to me the most. And so I left the profession of EMS and I moved into teaching in some similar fields as well as the dental field. And so now I'm feeling like, okay, those spirits aren't bugging me anymore. I'm out of that profession. I'm working on healing myself. I'm enjoying my career, but I'm still struggling in life. I'm still feeling like I haven't figured this out yet. So I go through what I call the quarter life crisis in my 20s. And I'm struggling in that time. And so, of course, I would be given another near death experience. So, yes, I had two near death experiences. Now, the second one, very different from the first. The second one, I'm now an adult. I'm recovering at home from surgery. So, unlike a lot of people's near deaths where they die in surgery, I made it through the surgery fine. But now I'm at home recovering. It was a full reconstruction on my knee from a skiing injury. And I'm at home recovering, and things seem to be going okay. But at some point, I'm hobbling on crutches from the kitchen to my bed I've made in the living room. And guess what? All of a sudden, everything starts to go black around me. So I start to see all these black spots. And before I know it, I'm gone. I'm no longer here. I am now floating in some space that I can't even begin to describe to you, but I'm floating in this space and I feel that same unconditional love that I felt when I was 5. I know that I am now tuned into heaven. Now I'm starting to put some pieces together as I'm floating. And as I'm floating there, I'm in my consciousness, I'm thinking like, oh, what about all the people that I love? Snap, gone, didn't matter. Then all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, this feels so good. As I'm doing that in my head, processing wherever I might be, these beautiful orbs of light start coming around me. Now, these orbs of light are colors of the brightest, most beautiful colors you can imagine. I'm telling you, blues and greens and yellows and bright. Like there was such a euphoric sense that came over me. And as these energies of light came closer to me, the understanding and knowing that they were angels came. There was no doubt in my mind. So even though I had this very scientific, logical background in health sciences, I had a knowing right then and there that these were angels. And I remember speaking to them and saying, I'm staying here from now on. This is amazing. Like, let's go. I was so ready. And I wasn't using words. This was all kind of telepathic communication. And I heard the angels clearly say in my mind, you're not staying, you have work to do. Now, I woke up from that experience. And as I woke up from that experience, my brother in law is looking at me wide-eyed, crouched down beside me. Okay. He had caught me when I fell because I went completely unconscious. And so he was there by my side as I went to this heavenly space with the angels. And I remember coming to and being like, you're not going to believe what just happened. But I couldn't find the words to express it. There was something inside of me that was like, don't tell anybody. They're going to think that you're really crazy. They're going to think you've lost it. This is not a story that you want to tell. So my ego really came in, that logical part of my mind came in and was like, oh no, you better not say anything. But in the next few days after, I had to tell people. I couldn't keep it inside. It was too profound of an experience for me. The ecstasy, the euphoria I felt, the magic of that moment was so profound. So a girlfriend comes over. I'm still in recovery at home. So she comes over for a visit. And I'm telling her the story about the angels and what I experienced. And something really special happened as I'm explaining my story to her. My brother in law, who was the one that caught me and was with me when it happened, he was eavesdropping, and I'm so glad he was that day because he came running into the kitchen. He slammed his hand on the counter and he said, I knew it. I felt the angels too. He felt them. He didn't see them like I saw them, but he felt them. So his story was that when I went on, he said I went white as a ghost, and then he said I was gone. So he guided me to the floor, and he said he couldn't find a pulse, he couldn't find my breathing. He was about to go call 911 because he thought I had died. Like he thought something bad happened, infection, whatever it was from the surgery, right? All these things going through his mind. So he's running to go find the phone, right? And all of a sudden he says he felt energies like angels. That's how he described it. And they said to him again, in his mind, he heard them say, she's going to be fine, just wait. And so he took a deep breath and he came back to my side and he knelt down and he said, within a few seconds after that, I opened my eyes with a smile on my face. So that experience of going through those near deaths were catalysts for me. However, people have said, oh, well, after your second near death, then you figured life out. No, I didn't. In fact, I wanted to go back to that heavenly place. So I was seeking that heavenly euphoria, but I wasn't seeking it inside of myself. I was looking everywhere outside of myself. Oh, I'll find that heavenly space when I have my children, when I find the love of my life, when I have the career, when I make the millions, da 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 da, right? Very extrinsic of myself. And so I ended up playing the I'll be happy when game. Do you know that game, right? I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I get this done. I'll be happy when I achieve that thing, right? And we play this game. Guess what, folks? It's a losing game. And I was losing badly because the more I acquired in my life, the more perceived success I had, the more miserable I got because none of it was fulfilling that heavenly void that I was craving. And it maybe just temporarily it might, but not long term. And so I fell into a very deep and dark depression. And so even though I had the successful career, this beautiful lifestyle, all the things, I was more depressed than ever before. Now, I also had postpartum. My son was only 6 months old at the time, but I fell into a place where I had chosen to take my life. I had decided that the pain that I was feeling, I felt like I had let God down. I felt like I couldn't be happy when I had all these things. How dare I? I felt guilt and shame for not being happy when I had what most people would just dream for, you know? And so I was in this very, very dark space, dark night of the soul, if you will. And so, as I'm deciding how I'm going to take my life to make it as clean and easy for people as possible, I pray and I say, okay, God, I need you to show me if there's another path. This is the only path that I see right now as a possibility. I need you to show me the other path. And that is exactly what God did. God showed me a holistic healthcare system that I was to start. Now, because I had healthcare background, because I had experienced my own health struggle, this was actually the perfect piece for me. And so that path opened up for me. And so I leaned into that. I got up the next morning. I started the business. I had this whole new lease on life. It was like opposite to me being like, my life is over to, oh, my life is just beginning. So I did this complete 180 there. And I started this business and I loved this business. As I'm taking in all of these different holistic modalities and these different teachers and coaches, I'm being introduced to things like the Akashic Records. Now, the Akashic Records is your soul's library. It's the space of consciousness, of unconditional love. I like to call it the meeting place with God. And so I started to lean into that. And by the way, any course I took as a skeptic. Again, science background, right? I'm like, there's no way people can read energy like this. Like, what are these hocus pocus people all about? And so I went in as a skeptic, and let me tell you, I was fully converted because everything that I had locked away, all of my gifts, all of my knowings, all of the remembrance of who I was started to flood back into me. And I was able to deepen that spiritual path. And so as I'm building this holistic healthcare system, I'm learning and I'm growing. And I get to a point where I'm at another fork in the road, and Divine says, okay, are you going to work this spiritual leg, or are you going to continue this holistic health business that you've got? I knew that I needed to let that business go and focus on my spiritual path and my education and my work in that realm. So much so that I gifted the company. I held a contest like Willy Wonka. There was no golden ticket, but you did get the business at the end of the contest. So I gifted that, and people thought it was crazy. They're like, how could you give a business away that you put hundreds of thousands of dollars into, 7 years of your life into? And it was actually the easiest decision I ever made, because that business, remember, that gave me life. Remember, that business was my way. That was my ticket out of the despair that I was in. And so I couldn't consciously sell that, right, for profit, because it felt like it had given me so much life. So that being said, that brings us to the here and now. I know that was a very long-winded, here's a little about me story, but I just felt so compelled to get that out. And so now I have the privilege of being able to walk within this spiritual path every day, in and out. I have the privilege of helping guide people into their own spirituality. So that's where we are today.
Okay. First of all, holy shit, what an amazing story. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for hearing me.
So many things that I want to touch on. And of course, I just want to check. You've only had two near-death experiences, right?
Two. Yeah. Yeah.
I have to ask, what didn't you learn from the first time? Like, why two?
Mm.
Like, what was in the gap from
Yeah.
to give you a lesson now at five?
Yeah. The gap, there's a few things that were in the gap. Okay. So the first time, I still very much felt like I needed to prove my worth. Okay. So I spent my whole life in that space. The second near death, it allowed me to remember the gifts. In the first one, I was still hiding the gifts. Like, I still didn't understand them. I felt like they were curses and not gifts, right? So I was still hiding those. In the second one, I started to let go of some of that overachiever people pleaser. Like, I still had a bit of it that I was playing with, but I had loosened some of that, let's say. And not only that, but part of my ego started to fall away too. Part of my remembrance of who I was came rising to the surface as well. So it no longer was in hiding. So that second near death was the catalyst to start bringing some of those spiritual components in, but I still couldn't listen fully. I was still too distracted by this extrinsic world that we lived in. So even though that was meant to be the catalyst for me to be like, oh my God, I'm supposed to do this spiritual stuff, I want this path, I was so distracted still. So it took me 5 years after the second near death to get it, to get that. Yeah.
A couple words really popped out for me there. I think this idea, this understanding that we, through no fault of our own, by the lifestyle that we've been brought up in, we are distracted all the time.
And
Mhm.
I just want to call out that I recognize and I hear everything you're saying in such a visceral way. I will not be surprised if we, folks, I'm going to share some emotion. I can just feel it in my chest right now. But before we jump into that, how did you navigate the disappointment? Because I can appreciate that right after the second experience, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But then by your own admission, it took years to sort of navigate that. Was it just a belief in yourself and something bigger that got you to that helped you to navigate the disappointment? Or was there something else, either extrinsic or intrinsic, that played a part in that?
So that disappoint, I don't think I managed the disappointment. If I'm being honest, I didn't manage the disappointment. And that's why I fell into that deep, dark space of depression because I wasn't managing that disappointment, right? That I couldn't find heaven again. I just wanted to go back to that place and I couldn't find it. What was wrong with me that I couldn't find it? What an idiot, all of these negative self talk pieces. So I don't think I actually managed the disappointment. All I did was ignore it. I'll be honest. I ignored it. I ignored it as best as I could, at least until it swept me into that place where I was contemplating my life.
Wow. Well, let's just take a deep breath and go, thank God. Thank you, God. Thank you, universe, spirit, whatever resonates with you, that you that you saw the truth, And for those of you that follow me, you know that I love to talk about the quote woo woo, but what you may not know is that, like my guest, I have ignored my own gifts, my own experiences for a long time, and not out of not out of a conscious fear,
Right.
but I just didn't believe it was me. I can believe it for others, but for me, I just didn't believe it. But the truth is, from the get-go, people have anybody that of this ilk would look at me and say, you do know that you got something special. And I'm like, no, I don't. And they're like, one of my very first jobs, well, not my first jobs, because I started working when I was 13, but I was a young adult and I needed some more money to pay the rent. So I answered an ad to be the receptionist for two psychics in Vancouver on
Mm.
Saturdays. And they were lovely, just a few years older than me, a couple. And when I met them, they looked at me right away and said, oh my God, you could be doing this too, And I'm like, yeah, no, just pay me $10 an hour and let me book your people. Not into that. But every time I get a reading, and I get them fairly regularly, I'm told this, but I've never embraced it. I touched with it a couple of years ago when I was developing my coaching business, and I was very excited, and my children are into it, and I got tarot cards, and I was playing this and playing that, and I got frightened, quite frankly, because I was with someone who, in my opinion, was not responsible with their gifts. And it frightened
Mm.
me and it angered me. And what was so bizarre was when I did a little reading for myself, my intuition told me that we had been through this before many times before in another.
Wow.
And we had always sort of gotten friendly, and then there was some jealousy and some judgment. And anyway, it's just, I just put it to the side. But then about 3 months ago, I said, you know what? My business isn't going the way I want it to. Universe, please bring to me what I need. Like, what do I need? And then I met you. In the 3 weeks or 4 weeks since we've met, so much has happened to me. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm feeling okay with recognizing that there is more than this. And everything I want is inside. So I think it's totally badass that I manifested you in my life. But more importantly, I think it's time. So many of us are searching.
Yeah.
So many of us struggle with mental health issues, for
Mhm.
example, and are looking for nirvana. We're looking to feel that way. And
Yeah.
we still struggle with how we perceive ourselves to be in the world, and what we should do next. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there and say, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. But also, let's get real. What do
Yeah.
you say to people when they're like, okay, you know what? Akashic Records, what the actual fuck are you talking about? I got to pay the bills. Like,
Yeah.
shit where I came from or what my soul has done in the past. I need my soul to know how I'm going to make ends meet today. Because that's the reason,
Ah,
right?
I get it. I get it. But here's a secret that I know for sure. You know, when I was 30, my goal was to become a millionaire, and I hit that target, but I was more miserable than ever before. And it was because I hadn't filled the soul bank yet. So, what I say to people who say, well, I still got bills to pay, I say, great, that's wonderful. Yes, we still need to function in this 3D world. You know, I'm not telling you to throw everything away. But if you begin to fill your soul bank, every other bank fills from that space. So, what does it mean to fill the soul bank? Well, that means building a relationship with ourselves. We are multidimensional beings, okay? I've got my higher mind, my God mind, and I've got my logical ego mind, and then I've got my physical vessel as well. And each one of those is craving a relationship with us. So when I tell people to go on a journey with your soul, what I'm saying is build relationship within yourself first. That's one of the best ways to fill the soul bank. So now I have this beautiful relationship with my ego self. I have this beautiful relationship with my higher self and with my physical body that I never even knew was possible. And then, as a result of those beautiful relationships inside of me and these healthier relationships and boundaries inside of me, I then get to see heaven reflected outside of me. So, heaven is not something to be found outside of ourselves, it is within us. And as we allow ourselves to deepen that relationship within ourselves, again, it's a mirror, it's a reflection in the outer world for us. So, even though I spent all this time like trying to create heaven out here, I was failing and I was miserable because I hadn't filled my own soul bank. I hadn't checked in with myself of what is resonant and what is true. I hadn't set boundaries. I hadn't listened to the divine within me. So I was missing all of those pieces. So that's the invitation. And by the way, you can fill the soul bank while you're earning money still. But I will tell you that if you fill the soul bank and you make that your primary focus, your love bank fills, your relationship bank fills, and your money bank fills, all the other banks fill up. So that's what I tell those people.
Such good advice. And it reminds me, I'm very visual. And when I first started this journey 4 years ago, honestly, the downloads were amazing. And I understand and I take them as that. Like, this isn't me, this is my higher self. I get that. And I've been like that for many years. For me, when I have a problem, I remember being a teenager and going, no, no, not my problem. I'm just going to put it up in a bubble and the universe will bring it back to me when I'm ready to figure it out. So I've been doing that almost subconsciously, right? So I'm very into that.
Yes.
But I also know that for some reason, I have triggers. Well, this is not some reason, I'm a human being, right? And I have triggers. And there have been distinct moments when I'm like, I just don't feel like I have the energy to question the trigger. I'm just going to go with it and be fucking miserable and worried for 3 weeks straight because I just can't. I just can't. So I appreciate that there's the concept of your soul bank,
Yeah.
but there's also it's like this inner struggle. The ego is like, wait a second, I'm going to tell you how to do this. Like,
Uh-huh.
hello. So I love that you recognize that we can't ignore the ego. We have to create a relationship with it. And there's all
Relationship.
yeah, it's navigating this relationship,
It
like
is.
because you're not going to get rid of it. Get rid of the ego, you kill, you're dead. Like you're not
You're
you.
not, you don't exist.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
that I thought was really interesting was when you talked about having a relationship physically. Um, do you feel from a data-driven medical health standpoint that our physical body, with being women and the hormones that we have, really affects our ability to have a physical relationship? And again, without knowledge or inner strength, let's say, it's very easy for women to just sort of lay down and play dead, right? I'm in menopausal, I'm pretty pissed,
Yeah.
not loving the experience. And
Right.
the relationship with my physical body, I've just given up.
Yeah. So I'd love to speak on that because I'm perimenopausal myself. And so noticing some changes as I move through this. Here's the thing. We have this program, most of us do, that our body is a burden to be cared for. that our body is a burden to be cared for. So we have this subconscious programming that says, oh, you got to feed this thing. Oh, you got to sleep. You got to rest. Oh, why can't this body do all these things that all these other people can do? You know, all of these programmings are playing. And so the truth is that your soul, when it decided to come into your vessel, it had thousands of other vessels it could have chosen. It had thousands of other times it could have come in, thousands of other locations it could have chosen. But out of such deep love, unconditional love, your soul says, that's the one for me. That's the golden ticket. That's the one for me. And so out of love, your soul chose your physical vessel. And yet you come into the world and everybody tells you you've got to be this way or that way, or it has to be this way or whatever. And we continue to berate. This poor body just says, I just want to be seen and heard. Can you hold space for me? I just want to be seen and heard. That's what your body's asking for you not to see it as a burden, for you not to reject the extra pounds that you gained over Christmas or whatever, right? But for you to love your body unconditionally. And so, yes, we have hormones, and yes, we have things that give us struggle. But those things that give us struggle are the last alarm bell. When you feel physical pain, when you notice something in your physical body showing up for you, that's like the final warning sign that says, hello, bing, 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 bing. There's something going on. There's something you haven't dealt with yet. And we now understand, even from science and the studies, that the physical ailments we experience, many of them are rooted in emotional despair and not dealing with those emotions. So, can I circle back and talk about what you talked about earlier around like befriending the ego and then like feeling those weeks where we do want to have a pity party and we do want to just be in worry? Because first, I want to say all feelings are valid and none of them are inviting us to reject them. So oftentimes people are like, oh, I shouldn't worry, push it aside. Oh, I shouldn't feel shame about this, I push it aside, or whatever, right? And they let it still play in the background, but they don't let it be at the forefront because it's an uncomfortable feeling, of course. But what happens is the ego also loves us so much. You know, back thousands of years ago, the ego mind, when we came out of the cave, you know, it said, run from the predators, right? That's what the ego was for, to keep us alive. But over thousands of years, we've allowed the ego to start hijacking us. So most of us allow the ego to make decisions, right? Most of us allow ourselves to run amok in our minds because of the ego coming in, judging us, criticizing us, whatever that is. Now, the ego mind is not intending to hold us hostage, but yet the ego mind really wants to keep us safe. However, we actually are meant to run the ego mind, not it run us, right? And so there's an opportunity when the ego brings something to the surface and it has a thought. And I'll use a little side story as an example. I was writing a final exam of a final degree. I have a health management degree I took in my 20s. And I was so excited. I was at the finish line. I was going to be done. It's my last exam, last class. Like, hurrah, I've got the degree. I'm done. But as I'm writing the exam, my ego pipes in and the ego says, oh, you don't know the answers to the questions. Oh, you failed a test last time, so you're going to have to rewrite this one too. So it's starting to play these stories. And so I'm writing the test, trying to get that ego to shut up, and I'm trying to focus. I finish the test. I know I failed. I know I failed. I get to my car, I bawl my eyes out because I don't want to do a rewrite. I just want to be done this dang degree. I get home and I email my professor and I say to my professor, hey, I really bombed that exam. I know I have to do a rewrite. Can you tell me what areas that I really was lacking or need to work on? And my professor emails me back and says, I don't know whose test you think you wrote, but you got 87%. How many of you have had an experience where your ego mind made up some whole story about how something was going to be or what it looked like, so much so it convinced you that that was the truth? And so we let the ego run amok. And then we convince ourselves that that's the truth, when in fact it is not. We actually, in metaphysics, we call the ego mind the false self. because in many ways it makes up these stories based on these experiences, and then it makes up this whole convoluted story. And if we're willing to buy into it, well, now we've gone down the rabbit hole, right? So the invitation is to catch yourself, to be the observer. So when the ego comes in and it says, you're failing this test, I can say, oh, thank you so much, ego. I know you're trying to keep me safe and you're preparing me for the worst case scenario, but I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing. And I tell that ego to step aside. And if I do that enough, guess what happens? The ego eventually knows its place. If we start to do that, the ego will know its place and it will not be interjecting as much. It doesn't come in for me as nearly as much as it used to, and it still does. But I have this healthy relationship now. And in fact, one of the things I suggest to my clients is to give the ego a name. And so my client the other day, she called hers Ivana Gripe a lot. So, I mean, you can have fun with it, but if you give your ego a name, then oftentimes it helps us to become the observer in ourselves a little bit more. So then we can say, oh, I don't think so. I don't, I called mine Jane. I say, no, Jane, not today. Not today, Jane. Not right now, Jane. Or I could say, Jane, where is this really coming from? If I want to be inquisitive, I can ask my ego to give me more information and say, oh, well, remember the time that this happened, right? Okay, great, Jane. What's the learning that I need to learn in this, right? So the ego will give us clues as to what's playing in the programming in the subconscious, but it will also step aside if you ask it to, if you invite it to. And so I think that that's important for us to understand because many of us are so lost in that. The other piece of that, I know you got a question that's on the tip of your tongue, but the other piece of that is the emotional energy that often comes in attached to the ego thought, right? So the ego thought will say, oh, this world's going to hell in a handbasket, right? And then you'll have worry that will come up as a response to that. And so when that emotion comes up, our tendency for most of us is to stuff it away, right? Most of us will stuff it away. Sometimes we'll sit with it, but in the cesspool of it, which is what you talked about doing a little bit too. And sometimes we just need to be in that pity space, and I get there too. But what the invitation is to actually not push and reject that energy, to not feel like we're doing something wrong in that place, but rather to say, I'm going to let myself feel this fully. I'm going to embody this feeling. I'm going to tune into this feeling because this feeling also just wants to be seen and heard. So if you can imagine worry as we cup our hands, I like to cup my hands and pretend like I'm holding a cute little bird or a bunny or something. And I say, oh, hi, worry. You're back again. Okay. What do you need to teach me today? What are you showing me that I didn't see before? What do I need to see here? And guess what? That energy will talk to me. That worry will say something to me. It's say, you're carrying the burdens of the world. And then I can say, oh, I don't need to carry the burdens of the world. Those aren't mine to carry, or whatever it might be. And it might not happen real time. Okay. But what I will promise you is that if you're willing to hold space for even those perceived low vibration energies, pain, shame, grief, all of those things emotionally, if we can hold space and we can see them and hear them, what happens is they naturally shift their vibrational field. So before you know it, your grief has become grace, your anger has become love, and you didn't have to try. You only had to see it, witness it, and let it show you the rest of the way.
So good. And thank you for sharing that insight. And, it's very similar to what I share with my clients as well, which is when we allow ourselves to just stop and breathe,
Mm.
and the more we do that, we can get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because to your point, we've been taught it's bad to feel, it's bad to swear, it's bad to be angry, little girls don't cry, all that crap.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
We need to remind ourselves, and you put it so eloquently, which is you just want to know yourself. That's all. We just want to acknowledge, just like our children, when I've got kids, well, they're grown now, but they want to be seen and heard. Mommy, I don't feel good. I don't know. I can't explain it, but can you just hold me?
Yeah.
Of course, of course, sweetheart. But I've had to learn, to your point, to do that to myself.
Yes.
And the biggest shock for me was that I have told the story before. You'll get a kick out of it. when I went into coaching officially, and I took a year-long certification program, I walked into it very happy. I got a great life. I'm so blessed, everything, all that story. And I remember being told that the first 6 months, we were going to learn all the tools on how to be just so that you could use these tools. And I went into sessions with my peers, and they all had these terrible stories, and they were sobbing. And I'm like, the fuck, these people are like, what? Can you just tell me how to make money? Can you just get to the business part? Because I'm happy. I don't need any help. And full disclosure, my very second time actually with somebody, I was a sobbing mess because with this tool, they just saw me, they asked great questions, and I melted. And I realized I had so much inside my very happy person that needed to be told.
Yeah.
And it was such an epiphany that I could be so happy on the outside while pretending instead of really knowing myself.
Yes.
So I hear you. And I was under the misunderstanding that only fucked up, sad people needed to work on themselves. When now I realize the complete opposite. I mean, we all have work to do.
Yeah.
But, my friend's ability to look at me and cry and say, I'm really hurting. She was way further ahead than me because I wouldn't even admit it. Right? So that, I mean, I am on this journey too, peeps. I'm a badass coach. I'm a badass cast, but let me tell you, I am learning every single day.
Me
so
too.
I love the way that you shared that. I do want to go back to Akashic Records. I'm very familiar. Well, I am familiar with the term. I've had an Akashic or reading or two in my lifetime, but I am almost 60, so we're talking years ago. Can you explain a little bit more about that? Because I think it's fascinating.
I find it fascinating too. And like I said, when I went into it, I really was a skeptic about it. And then once I leaned in, it was like the floodgates opened. So the Akashic Records is a space of consciousness that we can enter into through a prayer or a meditative state. So sometimes I go into somewhat of a trance state when I do sessions with people and readings. And so this sacred space is filled with unconditional love. Like I said, I like to call it the meeting place with God. And so, whether it's spirit guides or past loved ones that come through in that space, it's kind of like a container, a sacred container, if you will. Like some people will say, well, can't you just do an intuitive reading? Yeah, I could do that. But I create the sacred container because what it does is it creates that structure so we can put where that energy needs to go in the right place. It's kind of like if I open a fire hydrant without a hose, the water sprays everywhere, right? But if I put the hose on the fire hydrant, now I can direct where it needs to go and what is prioritized and what have you. So the Akashic Records gives us that container of safety and sacredness that allows us to deepen our relationship with ourselves, with divine and what have you. It is a space of everything that is, was, and ever shall be. So, a typical reading in the Akash will cover typically some past life stuff. It'll oftentimes cover off some, why is this happening to me? Why do I keep going through these cycles? What is the meaning of this, right? It will give us tools for here and now. And then it will also share future pathways. And I always tell people any future pathways, like if you're seeing a psychic and you're so hooked into what they're saying and you're like, oh no, the psychic said in 6 months I would do this, this, and this. I just want to remind everybody that you have the power of free will and there's so much that changes energetically. So reminding you that is a choose your own adventure and to not get too hooked into what somebody says because you really do ultimately have the power within you. And that's really important for me to share. I had a client that actually had spent tens of thousands of dollars on a psychic, and the psychic was telling this woman that if she didn't keep working with her, that she would never find the love of her life. And, I'm sad to say that there's stories out there, but there are people out there. And so reminding you that you have your own inner discernment, your own tools within you. We all were given the toolbox, you guys. I just happened to lean into the Akashic Records and it opened my toolbox, right? All the intuition, the clairvoyancy, the seeing, the clairaudience, the hearing, the clairsentience, the feeling, the claircognizance, the knowing, and the list goes on. But we all have those gifts. We can use them in our day to day. or we can use them in a professional setting if we choose to as well. But we all have them. And so you don't necessarily need to use the Akashics to unlock them. You can really just choose to unlock the toolbox or the treasure chest, if you will, whatever you want to call it. But there is a big invitation in the world right now, right? We're in this age of Aquarius, right? So the light is being shone on us more brightly than ever before. So people are having these experiences and these awakenings, and they're knowing that there's so much more to this world. And it's an invitation for us to come back into true remembrance, for us to come back into this beautiful journey into our soul. But there's also a couple other pieces that we're being invited to lean into. And one is this, you mentioned worry. And I used to be a worrier, I used to worry all the time to the point where I make myself sick. And what I understand now is that divine is my supply. Divine is my supply, meaning that everything that I need, everything I desire, comes actually from source. And I point up, but really source within us, however you want to look at it. Source is in all things, by the way. God is in everything. If we can truly understand that, we'll have more compassion, more forgiveness, more grace in this world. But most of us forget that. And so we start to go into worry. And when we're in worry, what we're saying is, I don't trust you. I don't trust you to supply me with what I need, right? And so it's an invitation for us to catch ourselves and to be able to lean into that trust and to strengthen the trust we have in divine. When I think back to all of my situations, and by the way, I've had many other, I won't call them near deaths, but I was on a plane that exploded. I was stranded in the Mexican desert. Like, I've had some interesting stories where like I've kind of like been meeting death as I've gone. And as I've gone through my experiences, I oftentimes would go through an experience and think, oh my God, that was the worst thing ever. In that moment, it feels like the worst thing ever, a job loss, a breakup, some sort of situation that you don't love. Only days later or weeks later, or maybe months and years later, you say, oh my gosh, thank goodness it happened that way, right? And so it's the reminder that we really are always being taken care of. And I think that that's so important for us to lean into and allow that to become a known for us, allow ourselves to integrate that knowing and that remembrance again, that the divine is my supply. And back to your earlier question about like, what about the people that say, well, I got bills to pay, this woo stuff is fun, but like I got bills to pay. What if you started invoicing God? What would that look like and feel like to you? And so it's this opportunity to open up our arms into this place of receiving. There's so much abundance, there's so much infinite energy, to open ourselves up to receiving that, right? And when we say divine's my supply, I do free sessions for people, I'll do free talks sometimes as a speaker. I invoice God. I just say, God, I know you got this. Sometimes I'll put a dollar amount on there, other times I won't. But nonetheless, I open myself up to receiving. And this aspect of opening ourselves up to receiving gets us out of the way. Because when we wake up in the morning, we often think, oh, I'm the one that has to do all the work today. It feels so burdensome, and I got such a heavy day, and I got full clients, or whatever, whatever. And we tell ourselves a story that it's going to be so exhausting, or this day's so busy, or whatever it is. What if when you wake up in the morning, you wake up acknowledging God, creator, source, again, whatever you name that, and you say, good morning, God. I know you're waking up with me, and I know you're going to do all the work that needs to be done today. Thank you so much. Because let me tell you, I started my days like that in the middle of the year last year, and it has changed my entire perspective. It's allowed me to be filled up as I move through my days. It's allowed me to not worry anymore, to not carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, to not feel burdened by anything. And there are days that feel denser, which I give myself permission to have those days too. But it's this beautiful practice of acknowledging how potent divine is for us, how divine is our supply, divine is our doer. It's our doer. God is speaking through me to you. It's not DeeAnne in my mind. I'm just letting myself be the conduit. And what if we all allow ourselves to do that just a little bit more? I just think that's how we create this new world for ourselves.
Wow. So good and juicy. One of the things that I really want to pull out for our listeners and people that are watching is, have you noticed how many times my guest used the word invitation?
Mm.
And I want to just reiterate that by saying, to your point, what if we looked at everything as an invitation, right?
It is.
Because it actually is. We do have choice. We can get curious. And, why do I, and I include myself in this, why would I choose to create a story around lack and fear and negativity and shame, which of course I've had many years of doing, when I could create a story around excitement and acceptance and love and grace and infinity? And oh my God, I do remember being a soul. Oh my, like I don't talk about that very much, but I do remember that. And like,
Oh,
oh my God,
wow.
my dreams, I am a lucid dreamer. And you know what? I don't talk about it, but every few months I dream of my past lives in other galaxies.
Wow.
I laugh because on Facebook, I get all of these, feeds. And one of them is like an astrological feed, and it's very scientific. And it's like, in fact, quite recently one popped up and it's like, scientists now believe there is a galaxy 9 times bigger hiding behind our galaxy. And our galaxy has 90 billion planets. And, it's this magnificent size we can't even comprehend.
Can't even.
And I'm like, yeah, I know that. Whatever, I know that. I don't need to follow this because I already know that. And then I catch myself and I'm like, oh my God, is that badass or is that crazy? So
I think it's badass.
today I'm choosing to say that it's badass, but I want to, as we wind down our conversation, I've heard a couple things that I think are worth repeating. This idea of, number one, create a relationship with yourself, right? Whether you call it ego or inner critic or inner bitch, like I do, or whatever, like just create a relationship and know that you do have a choice. And the other thing I heard, of course, was, I've already said it, is look at life as an invitation. What else can you share with our listeners that would help them to feel more badass, because that's the name of the show, or to help them get just a little bit closer to their divineness?
Okay, lots of thoughts going on here. So I'm going to just try and create some succinctness with this. The first thing that I want to share with everyone, and I mentioned we all have the treasure box within us of these gifts, these gifts of intuition. And I keep hearing this statement. And this is a quote that Spirit gave me years ago. Your intuition is always right. It's your perception of the outcome that isn't.
Mic drop.
I like, how often have you been guided to something? I remember being pulled towards this person, that my intuition called me to this person. And then we had this experience and it blew up in my face. And I remember thinking, oh man, I messed up. Was that not my intuition? What was happening there? I felt so pulled by this person. I felt I was supposed to go on that. And now it blew up in my face. And Spirit said, well, don't you realize the value and the learning that you're getting out of this experience, even though your perception of it is that it's not great? This is what you needed to hear. This is exactly what your intuition does. It guides you into situations, and they're not always rainbows and butterflies, people. Okay? Do not question your intuition, your divine intuition. Okay? Your ego mind, the chatter there, is not your intuition. And a lot of people struggle with that discernment piece. I'm telling you, if you start having those conversations within yourself with those aspects, you will start to get clarity of what's talking when. Okay? It's going to make more sense as soon as you just open up that relationship. The other piece that I feel is important to share, and I think this goes for most of us, especially if you're a woman who's been through some really hard stuff, or you've done some things that you're feeling shameful, guiltful about, whatever. It is giving ourselves permission to be exactly who we are. And what I mean by this is that when we show up in a certain way, in a certain experience, and say someone confronts me and I blow up and I get mad and angry, and then after I'm like, now I'm beating up on myself for like losing my shit and not keeping it together or saying the things I said, rather than going down that rabbit hole, what if we can say, no wonder I showed up in that way? No wonder. There is power in the no wonder, because no wonder gives us permission to show up exactly how we showed up. And it's not saying I'm not accountable for how I showed up. It's saying it's giving me some grace and saying I showed up in that way because of whatever other experiences were. And that's how I had to show up for that person. So it's the no wonder extends us deeper grace.
Mm.
And I'm inviting that because I think that we're so hard on ourselves, so hard on ourselves. And then we ruin our ability to experience joy and presence in the now when we do that. So I feel like someone needed to hear that today, to give yourself grace, to say, no wonder I did what I did. Because here's the truth. Everyone is always doing the best that they know how. And that might not make sense for some people because they might think, well, what about the murderer that did that thing? Were they doing the best with what they knew and what they understood? Yeah, that was the best that they knew how in that moment, even if we can't wrap our head around it. What that has done in understanding that. And I had a hard time believing that, like we're always doing the best we know how. And I think, oh, I could have chosen a better partner there and I could have chosen a better thing there. But when I look back, I think, no, I needed to go through every single one of those experiences and learnings. So I was doing the best that I knew how in that moment. And when we can give ourselves that level of grace, we are better able to give it to other people around us too. So it's a beautiful ripple of grace. If we can apply that to ourselves, then it will make it easier to apply it to others too.
So beautiful. It really strikes me as being very similar to this idea of being without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
We're so filled with judgment.
Yeah.
For ourselves as well. We don't
Yes.
realize that. And that was
Yeah.
another big lesson. Oh my God, I'm sharing lots of lessons today, but a huge lesson for me on this journey was how filled with judgment I am/was.
Yeah.
And recognizing that judgment hurts. It really hurts. Even though if I think I'm throwing judgment at someone else, I actually feel those feels.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's ugly. What I'm noticing is now that I'm working consciously to be less judgmental, it hurts me to be around others when they're being judgmental. It's
Yeah.
like the energy is so deep and dark, and I'm
It's,
like,
it's heavy.
it's heavy.
Heavy.
And boy, oh boy, every day it feels like the universe is giving me lessons to learn, which is
Right?
fine because I signed up for this. I've invited
Isn't
it
it
to my world,
so fun?
and now
Oh,
coming faster, fast and furious without a doubt. So I wanted to say thank you. This has been quite an unusual podcast for me and our guests, but it's exactly what I needed. And I know it's exactly what our listeners needed to hear, regardless of what's going on in their lives. But I'd love you to share with us how we can, how can our listeners connect with you? Of course, I'm going to have all in the show notes. So don't worry, folks, read the show notes, but tell us out loud what's going on for you next in your world and how listeners can connect with you.
well, thank you so much. So I speak a lot locally in Alberta. So I go around and I travel to different events. And so you can oftentimes see me through social media, doing different speaking opportunities if you want to do some following there. So I am, of course, on Instagram and Facebook, and those links will be in the chat for you. But I do have a gift for everybody. If they are curious, even just a little bit, maybe their spirit's kind of calling them in and saying, I don't know, but maybe. I have created a soul blueprint quiz. So it's a fun little quiz, only takes a couple minutes to do, and it will give you some insights as to how you show up and why you show up the way you show up. And then at the end, you get a gift of a free session with either myself or someone on my team. So you'll be matched up accordingly. And so you get a free reading. So you get to experience the Akash for yourself and lean in to see what is available to you on that. So we'll put that in there. I also have a podcast that you're going to be coming on soon called When Spirit Calls. So you can check out the podcast. And of course, my website, rosehope.ca, you can find about the podcast and all the different things that we have going on there. So you guys will see all of that good stuff there.
So good. And can I just say, for the record, my God, this girl is a badass.
Yay! I receive that. I receive it. I'm a badass.
When I first came up with the word to use in my name for my podcast and in my marketing, my mother-in-law, she's like, you can't do that. You can't use that word. And I'm like, oh, Mom, this is so interesting. Like, what's coming up for you? It didn't bother me in the least, but I recognized, right, that there's a generational thing and judgment, all that stuff. We're very close, by the way, folks. But what's so interesting is that I'm coming up with it again for myself as I get even more authentic with my messaging. So I'm experiencing, even just today, a whole new word that I'm contemplating bringing into my life. And I'm like, okay, Mahara, this, like, here you go again. It's okay, right? Language is powerful. And I'm trying to, yeah. So it's just, stay tuned, peeps. You're going to see it on, because I am going to make the change. I'm not going to say it now because literally I'm just doing the graphics and I'm talking it through. I've shared it with a couple of people and they've been like, oh my God, of course. Like,
Yes.
so funny, so you. And I'm like, this is interesting. It's as I lean into me,
yes,
my authenticity, I realize that I don't need to be afraid. I don't need to censor, because I know that whatever comes out of my mouth, it's coming from a place of love, honesty, and grace. Even if it's got letters in it that some people may go, you can't say that. And I'm like,
but is it your truth, right? And I think we're being called as well to this authenticity. I was afraid to tell my story for many, many years, but I will tell you the sense of freedom that I feel and the droves of people that come and say, oh my gosh, I've been the same way and I've been hiding. I've been hiding because I didn't feel safe to be seen and heard. And so when we allow ourselves to express our deeper truth, just like as you are doing, Mahara, you are giving permission for others to do the same. So thank you for being that gift for us.
Thank you for showing up to my show and talking to me. This has been folks, thank you for joining us today on the Art of Badassery. My name is Mahara. I'm your badass coach. Thank you. Huge shout out to my guest, Reverend DeeAnne Rose Hope. It's been amazing. And we'll see you next week on the Art of Badassery. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another badass episode. Your support means the world to me. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like, share, and rate the episode on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback keeps the badassery flowing. And hey, if you're ready to unleash your inner badass and conquer whatever life throws your way, why not book a complimentary badass breakthrough session? Just click the link in the show notes to schedule your session, and let's kick some serious butt together. Until next time, stay fearless, stay fabulous, and of course, stay badass. This is Mahara signing off.